As a die-hard Star Wars fan, I cannot think of too many other fantasy fiction lores when it's so extensive. Over the decades, the franchise has given us memorable characters who've left a lasting impact, but even among the legends, there's a little guy who's made his place. Yeah, I'm talking about one of the most adorable characters in the entire Star Wars universe, Baby Yoda, or Grogu, who's received an overwhelming amount of love from the fans ever since his first appearance. As the cute little sidekick of the Mandalorian, we've seen him grow his Force abilities, and even though he's around 50 years old, he's only a toddler if you consider the growth tendency of his species. Now that the new movie's been released, I thought this might be a good time to dive deeper into the unique anatomy of Grogu, and in this video we'll explore everything there is to know about his physiology and powers.
The Force. There's a chance a Jedi may sense his presence and come searching for him.
What is Grogu's true species, and what's the secret behind his unique appearance? Grogu, aka Baby Yoda, is actually from a very special lineage because he belongs to the same species as the legendary Star Wars characters like Yoda and Yaddle. This is what gives Grogu his strong ability in the Force, which I'll cover later in the video. He also has an interesting history, which I'm sure all the Star Wars fans are familiar with. In the TV series The Mandalorian, the titular Mandalorian is tasked to track down and capture Grogu as a remnant of the fallen Galactic Empire. But the Mandalorian becomes his adoptive father and protects him as they develop an adorable bond. Later, it's revealed that Grogu was raised at the Jedi Temple on Coruscant during the events of the Clone Wars, and eventually he is given the name Din Grogu, as the Mandalorian formally adopts him and gives him his family name, Din. Now, Grogu's actually 50 years old during the events of The Mandalorian, but he still appears to be an infant because his species matures very slowly.
Hang on.
Exploring his basic appearance and basic physical features. I'll probably say this several times across this video that Grogu is absolutely adorable and a goofy little baby, but what are his physical features that make him so freaking cute? And what is his basic appearance like? For starters, Grogu is small, green, and has a very baby-like look that makes him stand out right away. He has a round face, big black eyes, wide pointed ears, and a tiny nose and mouth, so his expressions feel simple but really clear. He usually wears a little robe, which adds to his cute old soul vibe, and his short height makes him seem even more childlike. Also, a distinguishable part of his appearance is his three-fingered hands that are typical of his species. Even though he looks like a toddler, he's actually much older than he appears, which is part of what makes his design so interesting. His skin is smooth and soft-looking, and his ears are long enough to be one of his most recognizable features. He also has a calm, gentle posture most of the time, but can still look curious, worried, or excited just through his face and body language. That mix of innocence and mystery is a big part of Grogu's charm. Of course, I'm quite sure that he will change as he grows, but don't expect him to grow drastically in terms of his size. Also, his features, like his large ears and eyes, will probably remain the same even when he's fully a grown adult. How powerful is Grogu with his Force abilities? He might be rather young for his species, but Grogu's already shown an enormous range of Force powers. With time, his powers have grown, and he's learned to be in control of the Force. Initially using the Force used to tire him out, but now he can use several of his Force powers without getting exhausted. He has mastered Force Levitate, which is one of the first instances of his powers that we've seen. I still remember the iconic moment when the Mandalorian was attacked by a massive rhinoceros-like beast called the Mudhorn. Grogu was present during the attack, and as the beast rushed towards the Mandalorian, Grogu used his Force powers to stop the Mudhorn and levitate it, much to the shock and surprise of the Mandalorian, who was then able to kill the creature. Also, another memorable example of his Force abilities was in the episode titled The Return, where Grogu faced off against 3 Praetorian guards and used his Force powers to defeat them. He also used his Force ability to shield himself, the Mandalorian, and Bo-Katan from a massive explosion. Also, in the recently released movie, you have a couple instances where Grogu gets to flex his powers, such as the intense climax where he uses the Force to save Rada. One of my personal favorites among the Force abilities in Grogu's arsenal is his Force Choke ability, which is a telekinetic Force power that allows Grogu to choke his enemies. This is actually linked to the dark side, and for this reason Grogu has rarely used this ability. I have to point out the time when he almost killed Cara Dune with the Force Choke for arm wrestling Din Djarin. Another very distinguished Force skill that Grogu has successfully executed is the Force Heal, where he can help an injured individual with his healing powers. Of course, he can do simple stuff like the Force push and Force pull, and the Force being used as a shield to protect himself and those around him is also a handy part of his Force ability. Grogu is highly Force sensitive. This is probably what makes Grogu truly skilled in the Force, and a lot of it has to do with his origins and his early training by various Jedi Masters. He is incredibly Force sensitive, and what I find absolutely remarkable is that he's even used his Force abilities to cloak his true power. He can feel other people's emotions and sense danger. He uses the Force to lift objects, calm animals, and help heal others, often without meaning to. Grogu has learned to hide his power. He quiets his feelings and pulls his presence inward so others can't easily sense him through the Force. This makes him seem ordinary to most Force users. Very strong or determined Force users can still find him, but his ability to stay hidden helps him stay safe and keep his true strength a secret. What's the lifespan of his species? Well, Baby Yoda is already over 50 years old, and he's still only a baby because of the longevity of his species and their slow maturing rate. The life cycle of their species is exceptionally long and drawn out if you compare it to humans, and they can easily span several centuries. The members of this species generally reach physical and mental maturity about the age of 100, which means that Grogu still has a long way to go before he's a fully functioning adult. Yoda was considered to be a middle-aged individual of this species, and he was around 514 years old back then. He finally passed away from old age at the age of 900. So I think it's safe to assume that their average life expectancy is right around the 900-year mark. How is Grogu able to bond with animals? I think this is a very handy ability that Grogu possesses, especially when you consider some of the crisis situations that he's endured. He can bond with animals through the Force, and there's a hint that this is a unique ability that might be something that Grogu's developed on his own. In the Book of Boba Fett's finale, Grogu's able to bond with Boba Fett's Rancor, and through this bond he's able to calm and tame this fearsome beast. There have been a few other instances where Grogu has used his unique Force ability to calm animals down, and one could say that this is among the rarer traits of how he has mastered his powers. What do we know about the food habits of Grogu? I mean, he's only a kid and it's clear he loves to eat. So let's quickly explore his food habits and the dietary norms of his species. I think the best way to explain his food choices is that he's an opportunistic carnivore and scavenger who has a massive appetite. He eats everything from live amphibians, eggs, and liquid broths. And we've seen how sneaky Grogu can be about food, often stealing a snack from anyone nearby. Aside from that, he can swallow small creatures whole, and I think frogs are his favorite food because he regularly hunts and catches them before swallowing them whole. Bone broth is the primary safe food that Din Djarin buys for him, and Grogu has a taste for amphibian eggs. I guess he has a very strong digestive system for an infant, and his species is capable of digesting a wide range of food. We've seen him eat everything from strange tentacled chowder to spiders and all kinds of small creatures. The thing is that Grogu needs to eat a lot and frequently, and that's because using the Force takes a huge physical toll on his body. It's only a massive calorie intake and sufficient rest that can help him recover. Also, there's a good chance that the time he spent in hiding made him so used to food scarcity that he now has a psychological urge to binge eat whenever he can. How is Grogu able to communicate without speaking? Grogu can communicate without speaking mainly through the Force, which lets him send thoughts, emotions, and images directly to another Force-sensitive person's mind. This is why he can seem to talk to people like Ahsoka Tano or Luke Skywalker even when he never uses normal words. Instead of making sounds, he can share what he's feeling, what he remembers, or what he wants, and the other person can receive it in a very immediate, almost private way. This works best with people who are also sensitive to the Force, because they can pick up on his mental messages much more easily than ordinary people can. It also fits Grogu's species, since they seem to have a natural connection to the Force, and may rely on it as a normal part of communication. With someone like Din Djarin though, this creates a funny problem, because Din is not Force sensitive and cannot hear Grogu's thoughts. So Grogu has to use gestures, sounds, and expressions instead. I think this is part of what makes him so charming, where he can be quiet but he still feels expressive and clear in his own special way. What are some of the major weaknesses of Grogu? I've discussed about his strengths at length, but Grogu also has his share of weaknesses. I would say that his primary weakness is his limited control of the Force, and he can also be emotionally vulnerable. Sure, he is powerful for his age, but When he uses the Force too much, it can drain him physically and mentally. This limited stamina can be used against him in crisis situations where he doesn't have the time to recover. Also, the fact that he's mentally immature also means that there are some immature judgments along the way. It's very easy to distract or manipulate Grogu. His backstory will tell you all about his traumatic younger days, and this means that he's emotionally shaken to some extent, and this sometimes impacts his decision making. As powerful as he may be, he's still dependent on the protection of Din Djarin or other Guardians for his safety. The personality of a toddler with Force abilities. I've said before that the most noticeable aspect of Grogu is the way he behaves, and his personality is both simple and complex at the same time. Grogu comes across as gentle, curious, and a little mysterious, which is a big part of why people connect with him so easily. He usually seems more interested in watching, listening, and reacting than in speaking or taking control, and that gives him a soft, thoughtful presence. Even when he's surrounded by danger, he often feels more playful than aggressive, especially when he's exploring, reaching for things, or showing interest in food and creatures around him. At the same time, Grogu's not just adorable and harmless, but also has a strong survival instinct and can be surprisingly determined when he needs to protect himself or someone he cares about. What makes his personality interesting is that he feels young and innocent, but there's also a sense that he's lived through a lot and carries that experience quietly. He often communicates through facial expressions, small movements, and emotional reactions, which makes him feel very human in a simple way. Overall, Grogu seems sweet, cautious, loyal, and deeply sensitive, and this makes him the adorable goofball that he is. Can Grogu reproduce? If you've been following our videos, you knew this segment was coming up, didn't you? So yes, to answer the elephant in the room, Grogu is capable of reproducing biologically, but we might have to wait a few hundred years before he reaches that maturity. As I've said before in this video, even though he's 50 years old, he's only an infant or a toddler mentally. And this is because of how his species matures slowly. But since other members of his species are confirmed to reproduce, I think it's safe to say that he can as well when that time comes. However, there's never been any detailed specifics about their mating habits, so I can't tell you exactly how their reproductive system works. So, all in all, Grogu's been one hell of an addition to the Star Wars lore, especially if you consider some of the recent shows or the recently released movie. I love watching his antics, and it's very entertaining to see him brave past all the adventures that come his way. I guess his anatomy really is very unique and rare, and that's one of the things that make him so mysterious, because so much is yet to be known about Grogu. Nevertheless, I hope I can shed some light into his existence by diving deep into his psychological details, and I strongly recommend that you check out the new movie, The Mandalorian and Grogu, because it is a solid entertainer. Do let me know in the comments below what you think of Grogu's anatomy and his wide range of powers. And also, share your views on the recently released movie. If you appreciate the efforts to bring you content like this, please hit the like and subscribe buttons for our channel so that you get future videos. And make sure to ring that bell icon so that you receive notifications when we release them. Have a great day, be safe, and as always, stay marvelous.